The best technology investments are platforms where the company does not make what is on the platform, the users do. And I'm going to talk about Roblox as a platform in a second. So the best way to think about it is the best investments are platforms where you own the road and you charge the cars. And I've got this here because whenever I do a Zoom call, I always have to ask people to unmute. And they ask me to unmute as well. All right, moving on. So Facebook is a platform, but they actually don't make any content. eBay is a platform, but they don't sell stuff on their platform. Airbnb is also a platform, but they don't own hotels. And lastly, Uber and Udemy are platforms. Uber doesn't own any taxis, and Udemy doesn't make any courses themselves. Similarly, Roblox is a video game platform that's awesome. My kids love it, but they don't make games themselves on their platforms. Their users do. And this is a staggering statistic, but more than 50% of people in the United States under 16 years old played Roblox over the past year. And it's actually growing like a weed as well. So how do we as investors judge how good a platform like Roblox is? Well, with most investments, there's one or a few major drivers that are most important to understand that move the stock. For oil companies, it's the price of oil and the supply of oil. And for retail stores, it's the growth of how much money each store makes each year, which is called same-store sales. And for many internet companies, investors love to look at a metric actually called daily active users. And they also refer to this as DAU, D-A-U, DAU. And I remember when Snapchat, the CEO founder, was trying to raise money from venture capitalists in the Valley here years ago. And he went to meet with tons of investors. And he just started the company. And a lot of investors were out of touch, older people like me. They said, well, with Snapchat, I don't get it. Like, why would I want to take pictures of my kids and have them disappear? And so people didn't want to invest initially. And then a year or two later, Evan, the founder, came back to Silicon Valley and said, remember me? My business model, we have 6 million daily active users. And then all the venture capitalists were saying, oh my God, that's the best business model ever, right? So it all comes down to DAU, daily active users. And people look at MAU as well, monthly active users. But let me focus more so today on DAU. So Roblox just reported its first quarterly results as a public company. And their DAU, daily active users, was 42 million in the most recent quarter, which is up close to 80% year over year. It's unbelievable growth. So how do we do research on stocks when it comes to the most recent quarter? Well, what we do is we go to sec.gov. And then what you do when you're at SEC, I'll show you the steps really quickly. You select in the top right corner there, more search options. Then you select the ticker, you enter the ticker, and for Roblox, it's RBLX. Then what you do is you select what document you want to open. Now, there's an 8K, which is what it's accounting nerd talk and finance nerd talk for an important press release. A 10Q is the quarterly report, the 10K is the annual report. But we want to open up the 8K, okay, so that we can look to see how earnings were. And so you open it up and you click on it, and you see here, these are earnings for Roblox, the earnings statement. And you click on the press release, takes a while to get there. And then you can see right here, the average daily active users, okay, the DAU, D-A-U, was 42.1 million, an increase of 79% year over year. Okay, now we know that an 8K means a press release. But before ever investing in an IPO, please do what I'm about to say. We have to read what's called the S1 filing, which is what the investment bankers and lawyers make before the IPO. So let's go back and let's look for the S1. So we'll scroll down a little bit here until we see S1. There it is. You click on Documents, the top link there. I know it's not the easiest thing to do. It's not the most intuitive website, but it works. Then what you do is you search for daily active users. daily active users. And as you can see at the top there, there's 14 instances of the word daily active users. So we search through it and we see that daily active users, when the company went public earlier this year, daily active users for Roblox grew 47% from 12 million daily active users in 2018 to 18 million in 2019, and then 33 million in 2020. Recall they're now at 42 million, which is amazing. Okay, but what about this? This here is called bookings. What does that mean? I thought that a lot of people think that when you look at earnings, you just look at revenue and earnings and that's it. No, you look at much more stuff than that. You look at DAU, if it's disclosed by internet companies, and you look also at bookings if it's also disclosed. And so new investors tend to only focus on revenue and earnings and not on the key drivers like DAU, daily active users. So the other number that investors must look at if it's disclosed is bookings. This is absolutely crucial. Now, what bookings means is revenue from the most recent quarter plus revenue that the company knows that they're going to get next quarter or next year. And so the way it works is this. If you sell 2 products for $10 each this quarter, but you only give one of the $10 products this quarter to your customer, then revenue is $10 and not $20 this quarter. Because you can't recognize revenue until you've actually delivered the product. It's the law. And people go to jail actually for trying to recognize revenue from next quarter and pull it to this quarter. Computer Associates did that last decade, and the founder or the CEO is still in jail in Long Island for doing that. So bookings is revenue plus what you already sold, but you didn't deliver for the next quarter. And this is crucial. And sometimes companies only post okay revenue and earnings, but smart investors look at bookings. And if bookings grew a lot, then the stock goes up a lot despite mediocre revenue and earnings. So let's look at bookings together for Roblox's most recent quarter. So what we're going to do is I'm going back to the press release for the most recent quarter, the 8K. And we see here that revenue increased 140% year over year in the most recent quarter. But what's much more impressive is that bookings grew 161% year over year in the most recent quarter. This number was so good that investors overlooked the not so great earnings result for Roblox from the most recent quarter. So how do we calculate this $652 million bookings from the financial statements of Roblox provided us in this 8K press release? Well, what you do is the first thing is you scroll down in the press release until you get to the income statement, which is here. And then you get the revenue for the most recent quarter, which we can see here was $387 million. Okay, but we're going to calculate bookings. So revenue we get from the income statement was $387. Then what we do is we go to the balance sheet. This is the balance sheet here. And we look at what was deferred revenue, meaning money they got for stuff that they haven't delivered yet. And so we have to look at deferred revenue for the next quarter, meaning the pipeline for next quarter, and then also for after next quarter. And so what we do is we look here at deferred revenue, the current portion, meaning what's coming next quarter, and what's coming after next quarter as well, which is net of the current portion there. This will make sense to you in a second. I have to run through these slides here. So recall that revenue from the income statement was $387 million. Bookings equals revenue of $387 million plus the change in deferred revenue. Let's calculate that. So we see here that deferred revenue in the March of 2021 quarter was $1.295 billion, okay, versus $1.07 billion in the quarter before that, okay, December of last year. And so that's $225 million in bookings. So this is for the next quarter. What about after next quarter, the pipeline after next quarter? Well, we see here that it's actually $44.2 million, which is $528 million minus $484 million. Okay, this is bookings, really, really important. And so that equals $269.4 million. So bookings is revenue of $387 million plus $269 million of deferred revenue, which is $656 million, which was unbelievable. It blew away all expectations. So again, recall, earnings weren't that great for the most recent quarter for Roblox. But it doesn't matter because some of the more sophisticated investors on Wall Street and globally, they looked at bookings, meaning the pipeline. Okay? All right. So let's now go to the top of the same press release, the earnings press release. And my bookings, I just calculated, was $656.4 million. But in the press release, why is it a little bit lower? It actually shows $652.3 million. That's a difference of $4.1 million. Why am I off? Well, I'm not off because what happens is companies release two sets of financial statements when they report earnings. One of them is GAAP, meaning the accounting stuff. And the other one, which I like better, is non-GAAP, the finance stuff. And I like the non-GAAP earnings that are released and numbers because they only include cash stuff. They don't include stuff that's not cash, like depreciation. And I teach this in much more detail in my MBA degree program. So why is my 4.1 million too high? Well, what happens is in press releases, companies also reconcile the difference between the accounting numbers, GAAP, and the non-GAAP finance numbers, which I like better. And if you scroll down, you'll see that there's a reconciliation table between non-GAAP, right, which is the finance stuff I like, and GAAP. And so you'll see here that the difference here when they reconcile is 4.1 million, which explains the difference between the bookings I calculated and the GAAP and non-GAAP ones. Okay, moving on. So the bottom line is that platforms can be unbelievable investments in the tech sector. Also, with internet companies, you have to look at DAU, daily active users, if they disclose it. And lastly, you always look at bookings if the company discloses it as well. And this will help you understand why sometimes stocks that release earnings that are not so great go up a lot, because sometimes it comes down to DAU being great or bookings being great. And I worked in the hedge fund industry for years, and there is this brilliant man named Dan Benton, and he started this hedge fund called Andor. But Dan Benton, he once said ages ago that software companies, or internet companies too, never miss just once. Okay, so if a company misses revenue and earnings, they're probably going to miss bookings as well. And so what happens is this: if a company thinks they're going to miss earnings and revenue numbers, revenue mainly, what they'll do is they'll try their best before the quarter is done to call their customers and say, hey man, I know that I have revenue from you and a product I'm going to deliver to you next quarter. Can I deliver it to you today? Because I really need this to make my numbers. And so if they do that, then they sort of make the quarter, but bookings suck. So you always look at the pipeline, because software companies and internet companies sometimes never miss only once. Now, I want to finish off this discussion with a quote from a man who I think is one of the best investors in history. God bless him, he just passed away, named Art Sandberg. And I worked for him years ago at a hedge fund called Pequot. And he and Dan worked together years ago at Pequot as well. What Art said was that you never stand in the way of insanity. What does that mean? Well, I remember back in 2006 when I was working at Pequot, a bunch of us were pitching some short ideas in the housing sector. Lennar, ticker LEN, and KBH Homes, ticker KBH. And our thesis was that it was a bubble, and so we wanted to short these stocks. And he said to us very nicely, he said, son, I've been around long enough to know never to stand in the way of insanity. You know, markets peak, markets trough. You cannot time the markets. So I thought that was kind of interesting.